Myrtle Gardens, Part 1, based on the true account of Laura Dove, adapted by Mr. Strange. Liverpool, 1981. Back then, Myrtle Gardens loomed like a red brick maze over Liverpool 7. Hundreds of flats stacked high, echoing stairwells that smelled of damp and cigarette smoke, and the sound of radios bleeding through thin walls. When my family moved there in 1979, we didn't think much of it. Just another council block, another chance for Mammy to start fresh after Dad died. But we were one of the few mixed-race families on the estate, and people didn't let us forget it. That first day, as we carried boxes up the stairs, a crowd of kids stood below shouting up, "Aha, you're moving into the haunted house." We thought it was just cruelty, but as weeks went by, we started to wonder if they knew something we didn't. It started one morning before school. Louise came running into the kitchen, her face pale, her voice trembling. There's blood," she whispered in the bedroom. At first, I laughed it off, but when I followed her, there it was, 3 dark red drops on the linoleum floor. No leak, no damp, no explanation. We lived on the top floor. There was no one above us. Later, as I tied my own shoes, I heard it drip, drip, drip. 3 more drops appeared near my foot, fresh and gleaming. I never told Louise. By evening, the blood was gone. Mammy worked nights at the College of Liverpool building, so it was often just us, me, Louise and Edwin, left to our own devices. We'd feed the telly with a shilling, and when it ran out, we'd play cards. One night, just after 8, we were dealing when bang! It was like someone had taken a running start down the outside corridor and kicked our front door with everything they had. Louise screamed. I froze, but Edwin, calm as ever, didn't react. "Didn't you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" he asked, still holding his cards. I didn't sleep that night. Every time the pipes clicked or the wind moaned through the gaps, I felt it, like something was just outside the door, waiting. A few nights later, it happened again. The telly had gone dark, and the room was heavy with silence. Then came the sound. A raspy, laboured breathing, an old man's breath, thick, wet and rattling. It came from the corner just behind the telly. I froze. "What's that noise?" Louise whispered. What can you hear?" I said, pretending not to. "There's an old man in the corner." That was enough for us. We bolted, shivering in the cold stairwell, until Mammy came home. She called us daft, of course, but we never went near that corner again. It was winter when things started to get worse. One morning, Louise woke up shivering, though the rest of the flat was warm. Her breath came out in clouds, and her bed felt icy to the touch, as though the sheets had been kept outside all night. She said she had a dream of an old man sitting at the foot of her bed, staring at her. He had no eyes, just deep black hollows. Mammy said it was night terrors. But when I went into her room that morning, I could still feel it, that cold, thick and heavy, like walking into a freezer. Weeks later, it was Edwin's turn. He'd stayed up late watching the telly after Mammy left for work. When the shilling ran out, the screen went dark, and that's when he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, coming from inside the wardrobe. He told us later that he'd stood there for almost a minute, frozen. Then the knocking started again, harder this time. When he finally opened the wardrobe, there was nothing inside but our coats. Nothing except the smell, a sharp, metallic, like old blood. The worst came one Saturday afternoon. Mammy had gone shopping and I was doing the washing up. The window above the sink looked out onto the courtyard, but I could see my own reflection faintly in the glass. Behind me, the flat was quiet. Then, clear as day, a man's voice said, "Get out!" I spun around, heart hammering. Louise and Edwin were in their rooms. No one else was there. I didn't tell anyone. Not that time. A few days later, Louise called for me in the middle of the night. She said she could hear crying, a woman faint and far away, somewhere between our walls. We pressed our ears to the plaster, and sure enough, there it was. Not weeping exactly, more like someone trying not to be heard. Muffled sobs, hiccuping breaths. We went next door the next morning, thinking maybe someone was in trouble. But the flat was empty. The old lady who'd lived there had passed away 2 months before. This happened not long after the breathing episode, maybe a week, maybe 2. In Myrtle Gardens, time didn't feel the same. Night stretched on forever, and the mornings came too soon. Louise and I shared a bedroom, 2 narrow beds on opposite sides of the room, with a brown wardrobe between them, and that old linoleum floor that always felt colder than it should. This particular night, the flat was unusually quiet. No neighbours shouting, no babies crying through the walls. Even the wind felt still. Edwin was already asleep in the next room, and Mammy was out on one of her late shifts. Louise and I were whispering in the dark, the way kids do when they're too scared to admit they don't want to fall asleep. Eventually, Louise stopped answering me. Her breathing went soft and steady. She nodded off. I rolled over, tugging the blanket up around my shoulders, trying to settle myself. But something felt wrong, heavy, like the darkness in that room wasn't empty. I closed my eyes anyway. A minute passed, maybe 2. Then it happened. At first, I thought the blanket had snagged on something, because it felt like it was being gently tugged towards the floor. I reached down, lazily, half asleep, to pull it back. But then, fingers, cold, bony fingers, wrapped around my bare ankle. Not a brush, not a twitch of imagination, a hand, a full, unmistakable grip. I didn't even scream at first. I was too shocked. My breath caught in my chest as the grip tightened, icy cold and impossibly strong, like someone trying to drag me off the bed. That's when I found my voice. I kicked out desperately, yanked my leg free and scrambled backwards, slamming myself against the wall. Louise shot upright instantly. What's wrong? I couldn't answer. I was shaking too much, pointing at the dark space beneath my bed, gasping for breath. Louise swung her legs off the bed to get up and check, and I grabbed her arm so hard she yelped. "No, don't put your feet down." We both stared at the floor, nothing, just shadows and silence. But I knew what I felt. It took us 20 minutes to gather the courage to run out into the hallway. We spent the rest of the night sitting on the top stair of the tenement, hugging our knees, whispering about what might be living under that bed. When Mammy came home in the early hours, she again found us there, half asleep and shaking. She shooed us back inside, saying it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't just a nightmare. Something had touched me. Something wasn't supposed to be there. Something that had been lying in the darkness beneath my bed waiting. And from that night onward, I never let my feet hang over the edge of the mattress again. Not in Myrtle Gardens, not anywhere. The last thing that ever happened was on a Thursday night. Mammy again had just left for work. The three of us were sitting at the table, the telly silent. Louise got up to go to the bathroom, and as she passed the mirror on the hall wall, she froze. "What's wrong?" I asked. She didn't answer, just stood there staring. When I looked too, my stomach turned to ice. In the mirror, behind her reflection, stood the outline of an old man, thin, haunched, his hands resting on his shoulders. And then he was gone. We all saw it, even Edwin. That was the night we stopped sleeping with the lights off. We moved out of Myrtle Gardens the next year. Mammy got a job closer to town, and she never mentioned the old flat again. But sometimes when I pass the old building, what's left of it anyway, I still look up at those top windows, and every now and then, I swear, I see something move behind the curtains, something that was waiting for us long before we ever moved in. I am Mr. Strange, and this has been another tale from Liverpool's haunted past.